So welcome to the next edition of the Punk CX podcast. With me today, I have David Roberts, who is the CEO of SugarCRM. Hi, David. How you doing? And welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Adrian. Thanks for having me. It's great to be with you.
You're very welcome. Now, David, could you give me a thumbnail sketch on Mr. Roberts, just for the benefit of our listeners and the readers of the highlights I put together, just so we get to know the man of the hour, let's say.
Yeah. Well, I've had a little bit of a interesting career. The thing that's kind of been consistent throughout all of it is a focus on customer. So I started at Accenture. I spent 17 years there and was part of the CRM practice there. I did something a little different and some people thought a little crazy and left Accenture to help the mayor of Denver run the city of Denver, all around a kind of customer focus and focus on citizen and resident services. So that was a fantastic couple of years before he went on to be governor and the senator from the state of Colorado. And then now this is my third software CEO role. And again, all of those have been in and around a focus on customer and front office and engaging with business buyers. So it's been a really fantastic 30 years.
Awesome. Now, I often have conversations in the run-up to actual real live podcasts. And the reason I do that is because just to try and get under the skin of some of the perspectives and things that people kind of share with me. And it also gives me almost jumping off points for these conversations. And so when we were talking in the run up to this podcast, you share a number of things with me that I wanted to explore because I just thought they were interesting and worth kind of talking out, as it were. And so I asked you if sellers or salespeople get any value out of the CRM systems, and you replied, nope, probably with an exclamation mark kind of following it. And I thought that's a pretty shocking admittance from the CEO of a CRM vendor. And I wanted to ask you, explain to me what you mean by here, what the problem is.
Well, I think there's been a promise in CRM all the way back from my early days with Siebel Systems that's never really been fulfilled. CRM is largely a management tool.
Right.
And those of us in management have this kind of illusion of control that by going into CRM and looking at your account base and your pipeline and your forecast, that we all can control the output or control the result. And I think that's not often the case. If you ask most sellers, do you love your CRM? I think they'd say, well, I block Friday afternoons and I spend an hour updating everything before I get a kicking on Monday from my manager because not everything is where it should be. I don't think they think that the system is working for them as sellers. I don't think it's helping them cut through the noise of their demanding and busy jobs.
And I know we're in this kind of era of AI and inverted commas kind of right now. I mean, does that make things any better?
I think it's going to completely change the game, actually.
Okay.
I think AI makes this promise possible.
Okay.
And I can explain a little bit why.
Oh, sure.
AI is huge to Sugar. We're spending so much time talking about it. It's going to be a big part of our identity. Everyone thinks AI stands for artificial intelligence, and it certainly does. For us, there's so many other things it can represent. It can represent actionable intelligence. It can represent real account impact. You know, I've spent a lot of time over the last 6 months playing with the letters A and I and what they really mean to Sugar. So here's why I think it changes the game. First, structured data. This is something that an engineer said to me once. I love it. Structured data is the language of business and unstructured data is the language of relationships. And a lot of sellers think in terms of unstructured data. In fact, they don't think of it that way. They just operate that way. So like emails, conversations, Zoom calls, text messages, all unstructured. What AI is going to do is allow us to ingest all that unstructured information and make sense of it. And not ask the sellers or the account managers to sit down and like type 30 fields in for every account or type fields in for every opportunity. So it's going to help on the way in. And then the other thing it can do is recognize patterns that exist, make recommendations to sellers on where they ought to go focus their time and energy. So it's going to change the game on the output too, both in the ingestion and in the kind of recommendations and guidance that the application can provide to account managers or sellers.
You said something interesting when you talked about kind of that salespeople block out their Friday afternoon to kind of like input their data or their conclusions or their feedback or their notes from the meetings they've had that week with their their prospects or their accounts. And it seems to me with the advent of these new technologies, and this is something I've been, if you like, noodling on, and I've spoken to a couple of people about and done that. I've done that for the last kind of like wee while. And it seems to me that there's an opportunity to use some of this technology to almost like proactively have a system proactively call a salesperson following a meeting. So you can draw on the calendar, you understand when things are finished. You could possibly do an outbound call using kind of voice AI and have almost a structured conversation with, tell me who you met with, how did it go, what we're talking about, how do they feel, and then use all those great sort of text analytics and sentiment and intent sort of deriving sort of like kind of tools to be able to populate a lot of the knowledge. And because also you can do it in the moment when it's fresh, and then you can then action things out of the back of that. And it has always struck me that how many of these, like to your point, many of these systems are designed as systems of control or record or whatever for management rather than for salespeople. And they lose the relationship bit that's the middle kind of part of the CRM. And I wonder if CRM providers like yourselves are moving to that type of dynamic, if you like, interface with kind of salespeople. It's because I know that people will say, oh, we can do that now because we can do that. We can record kind of like Zoom calls like this, and we can parse out kind of data. We can do it that way. But that sort of ignores the army of field sales reps that are out in the field going from appointment to appointment across different industries. And I just wonder if that feels like it's a thing that's on the horizon.
Yeah, I think it's here.
Okay.
I think account managers or sellers, after they walk out of a customer, they could just record a 5-minute audio or video that gets ingested back by the CRM system and made sense of. But I love, Adrian, how you talked about like prompting the sellers to actually engage in certain conversations, like, what'd you learn about the decision makers today?
Right.
There's so many. I think the real strength of selling is in discovery, being a fantastic listener, really understanding what's going on. And I think if as a seller, you're going to walk out and it's going to be the same 20 questions built on the methodology that really drives your organization, it keeps that front in mind. And early on in conversations, I think sellers ought to be talking 20% and listening 80%. Right. So what if after those conversations, it's saying, what's the compelling event that's going to make this customer make a decision? Or who's the competition? What are the decision makers thinking about why they might select you? Like just really probing and letting the person talk out loud about what they learned during the course of that meeting. I'll tell you a story. In the early days of Anderson Consulting, we had a system called Octel, and it was a voicemail system. And we used to do all our business by recording voicemails back and forth to each other. It was so easy. Like tapping out emails is such a pain for all of us who do it. Updating systems is a pain. Like, why can't we just talk back and forth in a way that like humans interact in a way that's easy for all of us? And I think that's where CRM's going. It's certainly where Sugar's focused.
Awesome. And I mean, that's good to hear. Again, I'm sure there's probably salespeople that are that they might be listening to this going, that made my life so much easier.
Hallelujah. Right.
Particularly if they're kind of having to walk to the next appointment, or they're in the car and they have like somebody kind of call in, or you can do an outbound where you just kind of think through kind of like all the things, and it just goes straight into the system then kind of parses out all the, to your point, actionable intelligence that you kind of gather from those kind of meetings.
That's it.
But there's another thing that you kind of like said that I wanted to ask about, because you talked about in the nature of all of this CRM, just building better relationships with your customers. You suggested there was possibly a bigger problem at play where organizations are taking a tool first, problem second approach. And I wanted to better understand what you meant by that as well.
Well, I think in the software industry, we all get trapped into conversations about functionality and features. Everywhere I've been, it's something that's sort of endemic. I think what we aspire to do is have a thin CRM layer, right? That's ingesting the information like you talked about, but then collecting everything we know about a customer from It could be the ERP system. It could be from the quality management system, the back office that knows so much about the business, and putting that in context for a seller so they know where they need to go focus.
Right.
One of our solutions, for example, allows you to ingest tons of order data across a massive account base, a massive product catalog, and to say to a seller, did you know that this customer isn't reordering at the same rate they historically have? And maybe you ought to go sit down and talk to them about it, right? So just go beyond the insights in the dashboards, actually give them the prompt on what they ought to go talk about with which customer and why.
Yeah.
Give them all the context of what led the CRM solution to suggest that as a potential next step. So I think we can leverage AI to accomplish that as well.
And that feels linked to something else you mentioned. It was this idea, the role of is what you're kind of talking about there, contextual intelligence, because I've heard that around the place. Everybody's talking about context and contextual intelligence. And is that what you're meaning here? Is that what are your kind of plans? Is about having the systems kind of surface some of these insights and then kind of like then prompts kind of like subsequent actions?
Yeah. A year ago, I started talking about the ABCs of intelligence: artificial intelligence, business intelligence. We spent a decade building dashboards and BI systems, and what's led to contextual intelligence. And I think I keep hearing it now. Everywhere I go, everyone talks about contextual intelligence, because without the deep context, AI isn't specific enough about where people ought to go focus. I think we've got to narrow the aperture a little bit and provide a ton of context so that people, so that the AI solutions have a hope of actually guiding people toward a specific idea, recommendation, or action. And I think that's all we're going to hear this year is contextual intelligence.
But I'm also going to hear that some people are talking about that, the contextual intelligence and building these contextual intelligence kind of like layers. And many people are trying to sort of that. And some of them have been predicting that CRM's days are numbered because of that, because you end up with this static kind of system of record, but actually context is kind of where it is really at. Yep. You also said to me that you think this is going to play an increasingly important role in enterprise applications because it's like moving kind of forward. I mean, can you kind of like lay that out for me in terms of what you mean?
Yeah. You mentioned it's a potential threat to CRM. I think people have been talking about it as a threat to enterprise software, right? You go look at valuations of enterprise software companies right now, and everyone talks about the SaaS apocalypse. I think that's all a bit overblown. I think businesses still need to work within business workflow, right? It's not like a company who wants to run with predictability is going to allow like workflow and process just to be dynamic and everyone doing things a different way. I think there's too much required in the workflows that drive business, not only within sales, but throughout the entire enterprise, that workflow is still going to matter. I think where AI is going to deliver a complete revolution is within that workflow. So ideally, people don't even know it's AI. They're just continuing to engage in a sales cycle or in a buying process or in a fulfillment cycle, and AI's making them better at what they do. But I don't think that changes the fundamentals of the business workflow.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating because it as you can like rightly pointed out, is that the strength of these systems is that it can sift through and find kind of patterns in gargantuan amounts of kind of data that this wouldn't be possible otherwise. And so if that spurs kind of better actions and then better relationships, then that's only ever going to add value.
Yeah. I think selling is about a human connection. And I don't think AI replaces sellers. I've said it a whole bunch of times now, but I think AI gives the sellers an Iron Man suit that allows them to be faster and stronger and more powerful. But it's still the human inside of all that that's going to convey belief and engage in discovery and listen and understand. I think AI actually makes the human parts of the selling experience more important and more valuable.
I mean, so it's always good to kind of like, it's always interesting, so when I get to embrace my inner nerd and kind of explore some of this sort of stuff. But I think also it's useful to to explore where people are making changes and getting value and delivering kind of results. And so, do you have any examples of brands that you're working with that you can tell us about that you think these guys are getting it right? They're spot on. They're leading the charge. And if so, can you tell me a little bit about them, some of the challenges that they face, what they've done, and how they're kind of benefiting, the sort of outcomes that they're driving?
Yeah. Well, I think maybe it's a little bit of a long answer for you, Adrian, but I think that we haven't yet cracked the code largely on how AI really drives business results, right?
Right. Okay.
And I had somebody say to me the other day that it's almost like you need AI agents to have a role on your org chart, to have a job description in terms of what they're supposed to be doing. I think the thinking in the last 6 months has become more specific about how AI is going to drive a specific result. We've got a customer in Florida that does auto parts for large tractor trailers, or lorries, as you might call them over in the UK.
Yep.
And they've got distributors all over the place, and they've got auto body repair shops all over the place, and they're dealing with a catalog of 10,000 different parts. And it's really, really hard for that seller or account manager to know like what they should talk to which customers about based on what needs and what buying patterns. And that customer is driving pretty significant results in having those sellers get insight from the order data that's happening across their distribution network and across their product catalog, and being able to have those more specific conversations about, most customers that look like you buy rotors, brakes, and pads from us, but you don't seem to. What's going on?
Right. Okay.
Sellers always want to have something specific to talk about. They're desperate to be in front of a customer having a meaningful conversation, and they're kind of wondering what they should go say next. Like, we've got a dozen different examples of customers that are using our solution to have those more specific conversations and seeing great results from it.
Okay. No, it's interesting. I mean, and as you say, it's I think we're early in the stages of driving definitive kind of ROI and outcomes, because I guess the application space is just like so large. But I think that's definitely where the pressure is on, is actually to deliver that sort of demonstrable sort of value, kind of like right now.
It is. I think we keep thinking about AI like we use it in our personal lives. I call it the ask me anything approach, where yes, I can go in and ask a really long question at ChatGPT and get a really rich answer back. I think that's somewhat helpful in business. I think it's more helpful if there's a specific job to be done and we're thinking about like what outcome we're trying to drive to, and we're building AI to achieve that specific result.
And so finally, I know that you're deeply immersed in this sort of space. What sort of trends or things are you expecting to see or emerge over the coming kind of 12 months? Because you're kind of like, you're very close to kind of this, and you're seeing how people are adopting the technology, adapting to the technology or not. And I just wanted to see what you're kind of seeing, sort of sensing from the ground.
Yeah. Well, I'll share two things I think that are happening right now. One is, I think people, when they've thought about implementing enterprise software, they've thought about process and data. That's what they've thought about, process and data. I think what we're going to see is a huge uptick in our focus on content, right? So when we think about implementing CRM, it's not just what's your account data look like, what's your sales process, entrance and exit criteria for sales stages look like, but we're going to now, as part of an implementation, upload a sales methodology, upload objection handling, upload competitive battle cards and intelligence. Like the things that become part of the context gets well beyond just process and data.
Okay.
The second thing I think we'll see is people are both really excited and slightly freaked out about the privacy and security issues that come along with AI. And I think we're going to, just like back in the year 2000, where people were all worried about hosting things on the internet, I think we're going to see a lot of focus on how we build more trust in containing the data sets and content within analytics or AI solution in a way that builds confidence with customers to be able to take on and try these technologies, which I think people are still a little skeptical about when it comes to those privacy and security concerns.
So tell me a bit more about that sort of uploading the sort of the sales methodology and the objection handling sort of thing. I guess what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to then map out what your process is, and there's different sort of like stages of it, and then there would be certain documentation or manuals or artifacts that are going to help in that sort of regard. Is that how it's going to work? So you're tying all these things to different process sort of steps.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. We call our platform a precision selling platform.
Okay.
And the only way it's going to be precise in the world of AI is if the underlying LLM and conversational AI platform knows a ton about the business, the products, the customers, the distribution channels, the fulfillment model. The more it understands, the more precise it's going to be able to be. So instead of just going and implementing integrations and data connections and fields, I think we're going to be spending a lot more time, which is going to mean that customers have to be a lot more prepared in also implementing all that other content that helps inform what you might have thought of as sales enablement or rev ops in the past. And now it's going to be core to what our CRM solution is going to be built on.
I guess that would also kind of give you insight into performance management, but also process performance management as well. Because I think there's always a danger that people make assumptions that the process that you think that you work to actually works. And I guess this will give you clarity on whether it does or not.
Well, just like being a seller's hard, being a sales manager is incredibly hard. Like they're expecting to monitor whether their salespeople are following the sales stages and following the sales methodology and doing good discovery and doing good solutioning. These are all things that are incredibly hard for sales managers to stay on top of. Again, I think AI, just like it gives an Iron Man suit to a seller, is going to give an Iron Man suit to the sales manager as well, and help them do a better job of knowing, which reps need to be coached on which things, and they can spend more time getting right to the core of what makes a difference to that seller.
Yeah. It also, I guess, it would also give you the opportunity, or give you some insight to understand whether or not your maybe hard and fast process actually still should be hard and fast. I mean, because there might be somebody that does something which is just different, but is producing way better results than your other team members, and so it gives you that, shines the kind of the light on, oh, this is a different way of approaching it. Maybe we should take that or evaluate whether or not we should change in line with that, because it's driving better results.
Yeah, and I think to your point, it can go beyond anecdotal, because I think a lot of people say, hey, my process is better. I can get to this answer better, and it's anecdotal. But if AI is helping monitor and manage the sales process, you can actually see that a different way of doing things is having a tangible result. So I think it takes it beyond the anecdotal approach you might get from a certain seller or a certain manager.
I think also the other thing I mentioned, I remember, I forget the gentleman's kind of name, but there was Matthew Dixon wrote a book. I think it was The Effortless Experience, and then some sales ones as well. But he wrote a new book, and it was called the Jolt Effect or something. And what he realized, particularly in enterprise sales or business to business kind of sales, one of the biggest things, the biggest blockers for decisions is just customer indecision, and they're almost their tendency to default to the status quo, i.e., I'm not quite sure, therefore I'm not going to do anything.
Right.
But then he showed that through his research, and this was analyzing like 1 million plus sort of sales calls, that there were certain sellers that did different sort of things that just took that customer indecision away by doing certain things, almost de-risking the process. And I guess you could then start to think about some of this theory, if you like, this empirical sort of theory, and start shining a light like that onto some of your own kind of results to see, well, actually, what many things which might be put down to, it's just the way that things are at. Maybe there's something extra that you can do just by being a bit more empathetic for where people are at.
Yeah, I think that's right. we lose more deals to indecision than any other reason.
You should
Because
read the
you're
book, maybe.
Sticking with the stats, I know. I just wrote. I just took a mental note, Dixon, so I can follow up and take a look at it. But I think indecision's a big challenge for us, and the best sellers create some sort of compelling event that's not tied to a quarter end or a financial deal you're running. It's actually tied to that customer's business objective and their effort to like make a difference in their own business. So I'll take a look at it.
Well, I'll send you the reference at least for the podcast. But David, that's kind of really interesting to learn a bit more about kind of where you're going and what you're trying to do, particularly around that sort of the rise of the contextual intelligence and how we try and make some of these applications a bit more user friendly, let's say, and make them work for people. But before I ask you some sort of quick fire questions to wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to add, or anything else that's top of mind that you'd like to share with us before I move on to these quick fire questions?
No, I'll just say that, I think CRM's lost its way a little bit.
Right.
And no one's quite sure what it means. Everyone thinks it's a 360-degree view of the customer. It's the customer system of record. But this promise we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, actually helping sellers sell, which, there's a bell curve in every sales organization. The top 20 is always going to hit the number. The bottom 20 is kind of hopeless. The middle 60 is where you make it or break it. And if you can just move that group, 10% to the right, it has a dramatic impact. And I think that's what ought to get leaders like me or sales managers excited, is that you can actually impact the performance results of that middle 60. And that's, I think, the holy grail of CRM.
Awesome. So let's see if we can kind of move the bell curve to the right a little bit.
Okay.
So here's some quick fire questions I have. I have 3. And the first one is, which I always ask, it's about boiling things down and asking people for their best advice. And here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to ask you to complete this sentence. And the sentence is this: if you want to improve your customer experience, David says, do this. ... Complete that sentence.
Yeah. Listen, have great discovery, really be curious about your customer's business, understand what motivates the person you're talking to, how they're successful in their own role, and figure out how what you do can help them achieve that.
Awesome. Thank you. And the second one, it's a punk one, obviously. It's a Punk CX podcast. So tell me, what company or brand do you think takes a more punk approach to customer experience, and why?
Punk experience. I'll tell you, my wife is a huge punk rock fan, and it's been a big part of the music that we're helping our 14 and 16-year-old boys appreciate. I don't know if this is a punk experience, but I love the brand Sonos, which is a music speaker system. Yeah. And what I love is they take a massive amount of complexity and they put it into a super, super simple user interface.
Right.
And I think like where companies can do that, they can abstract the complexity of what they do and make it really easy for the customer consumer to be able to interact with it. They leave everyone else behind. So I'm not sure if that's punk, Adrian, but that's a brand I think that does an amazing job.
Well, no, I've heard great stories about their, particularly their service and their support. I've heard people kind of mention Sonos to me before, and they rave about their products. Quick sub question: what's your wife's favorite punk band?
Man, I think London Calling by The Clash might be her favorite.
Good choice.
Not bad.
Good record.
There you go.
Nice.
I don't think that people listen to records anymore. It's it's a complete piece of work, right? The entire thing hangs together. And now we all listen to songs and we're like dialing up specific playlists. I think the beauty of an album or a complete piece of musical work is a lost art a bit in our current generation.
I think it might be, but I'll still refer to them as records and albums because, well, I've got the gray hair to prove it.
Well, you know what's funny, Adrian? I've gone from records to cassettes to CDs to online, and for Christmas last year, my wife bought me a turntable, and I'm back to buying LPs again. So it's come full circle.
Love it. So my final question before we wrap up, and I've been asking people to do this for me for the last kind of like wee while, because the world's in a weird place. And so I've been asking them to tell me a good news story, David. So tell me, what's the most interesting, positive, or exciting thing that you've seen in the last week?
I was in Australia, as I mentioned, and I went out for a run both mornings, or a few different mornings. And one of them was along the river in Melbourne. And I sat down with a customer later that day, and they talked to me about what the Australian Open's been able to do to create an entire experience around tennis. It's becoming a big cultural event throughout all Melbourne. And the person who's led it over the course of a number of decades has just had a huge impact on that city and on tennis broadly. And it was a really fantastic and inspiring story.
Well, I love it. Something like a sporting event has turned into a bit of a community and cultural event.
Exactly right.
Well, that's great. David, thank you for that. That is all that I have today. I just want to say thank you for sharing your time and your insight and your expertise with me today. That's been super cool.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it, Adrian. Thanks for having me.
Wow, what a great interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Find out more about me and the work that I do at adrianswinscoe.com. Do leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you have any comments, feedback, or questions about the podcast, then feel free to send me a message to podcast@adrianswinscoe.com. And do tune in again. Thanks very much.